Good evening. Let's talk about Sasquatch being a hybrid. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right off the bat, this isn't necessarily what I personally believe is to be the case. They may be their very own species, their very own types, through their own evolution and just being a natural creature in the woods. Uh, but there's a lot of interesting theories I've heard out there, and I want to give them to you guys. And there's a lot of speculation that they're a hybrid, and a hybrid of what, and different combines. And some people say they're an ape, some people say they're human, some people say they're the Nephilim. And there's a lot of different theories on where Bigfoot and Sasquatch came from. And I think some of the more out there stories that I don't necessarily dismiss, I try to take everything as it comes and believe everybody, but you hear stories about them cloaking or disappearing or mind speak or different abilities or getting a feeling of dread or evil or a feeling of calm, even in peace. A lot has been attributed to these creatures that isn't just purely natural. So we're going to look at a few scientifically possible theories, different ideas, and then we're going to get into some more out there kind of stuff. First off, the most obvious to me, and people disagree, but when we talk about Bigfoots, we have the many different types on this channel. But the two most basic types are the type 1s and the type 2s. The type 1s being the bigger, the outer range of 10, 11, 12 feet tall. This is your Patterson Gimlin type Bigfoot. Seem to be very gorilla-like. Now, I'm not saying they're a gorilla, but they're very gorilla-like. They have the large sagittal crest, the protruding brow, large shoulders, very strong, built very powerfully. Like a lot like gorillas in temperament, where they can be aggressive and protective, but generally the big type 1 patties like we have in the Pacific Northwest tend to be a little more calmer, tend to be a little more easygoing. And to me, a gorilla, like we have a lowland gorilla here, especially like a big male, seems to be a pretty good starting point to how I would describe these creatures. Now, I know they're not a gorilla as far as the nose and everything else, but it's a pretty good starting point for general anatomy. The type 2s, like the wood buggers like we have in the South, they still get very big, 7, 8, 9 foot tall. Not quite as big as the patties, but they have a little more of a round head, a little more of a chimp-like behavior. Chimps are a lot more excitable than gorillas and generally can be more aggressive. And that seems to be the case down south. You know, they've got all the snakes and alligators and everything else, so it makes sense that their Bigfoots would be a little bit more dangerous sometimes, a little more excitable, like the Mogollon monster in Arizona and all the wood boogers in the South and all the ones in East Texas. I think they have some patties in there too, but primarily you have, it looks like a lot more chimpanzee based. A lot of people say it looked like a big upright walking chimp. And if you're familiar with a billy ape, there is a little bit of precedence for a upright walking chimpanzee. So they pretty much, the type 1s look more like a gorilla and the type 2s look more like a chimpanzee. But they are not those. It's like if you took those two species and crossed them with a human. And interestingly enough, when you get into chimpanzees, they're our closest scientifically accepted living relative to human beings. You share 98% of your DNA with a chimpanzee. 5 fingers, 2 eyes, a large brain, the general anatomy, lifespan, diet, that kind of stuff. A lot of it crosses over to a chimpanzee. And a lot of people have said I'm all wrong believing evolution. And this video isn't about what I believe. It's just, we're just talking about general scientific theories that there is, believe it or not, that's fine. But there's a lot of scientific evidence for, modern humans, and then going back to other hominid species, Neanderthals, Homo heidelbergensis, and then going back to Homo habilis, and then Homo erectus, and some of our earlier ancestors. And this wasn't a straight line chain. I think most of people know these days that we existed along with other species as they died out. So it's not like a direct chain, like this turned into this turned into that. There's a lot we don't know about the fossil record, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of reports that Bigfoot looked a lot like a Neanderthal. And when I saw Dr. Jeff Meldrum's presentation, when he tried to do an anatomy of a Bigfoot skeleton, he actually upsized a Neanderthal skeleton being a lot more robust than a human to support such a large frame. Now, he didn't necessarily believe that that's how they were built, but it was definitely very interesting that he thought that that would be a nice, robust skeleton to support a large primate species if it were walked upright. And there's definitely seems to be a lot of Neanderthal. I know there's books on us and them and other things about the hairy Neanderthal theory and that they were a lot bigger. So I thought that was interesting. If we're going to hybrid a Bigfoot, if we're going to make a Bigfoot a Neanderthal, uh, or as you see here, a Homo heidelbergensis, which was a bit for the Neanderthal species, and they actually had a Heidelbergensis robustus. And compared to the other early hominid species that were quite short, these were taller. They're not like Sasquatch tall, but they had super robust bones, and they were, these are basically like the Superman of the day. So this would also be a good candidate if you were going to crossbreed and try to make a Bigfoot, an upright walking, a lot more hair, a lot stronger, generally would pretty much leave most human beings in the dust as far as just physical prowess and still be quite intelligent at the same time. So let's talk about some more of the out there things I've heard I'd like to pass on to you. And as fascinating as the scientific end of it, comparing accepted animals and accepted theories, and as intriguing as it is, some of these more out there stuff, I mean, I really enjoy hearing it. Like I said, not necessarily that I believe it, but it's definitely fascinating to hear. And in some ways, it actually fits the mold and explains quite a lot. Now, a lot of people say that Bigfoot is the Nephilim or an offshoot of the Nephilim, or they were some kind of an ape species that had Nephilim blood in them, coming way back and maybe diluted to a certain extent if you want to think of it that way. And that's a pretty common theory. A lot of people think they're the Nephilim and they're evil and they have an evil gene, or maybe even not evil, but being soulless or an empty vessel, so to speak. Almost human, but not quite human with no soul. And another real out there theory is that there was some kind of a other creation, not what you would think about God or not what you would think about natural evolution or science, but that alien life, that some other civilization beyond the stars, extra extra dimensional, maybe even from a different time period, or ETs have often been speculated to be maybe human beings from the future coming back to visit us now to observe what was going on or to study the past. I mean, what better way to study the past if you could go to the past? So it's very fascinating that maybe Bigfoot had in hand in being created by something else out there. So that's one of the big theories out there. The other theory that I've heard is that there's that government experiments. Now, I wouldn't doubt that if they, if the government does know about these large, creatures that are basically forest ninjas and strong and can run super fast, that they would want to create their own super soldier type program, or have these things be captive and drop them into a war zone, or study how they do the things that they do. The only problem with saying that modern Sasquatch is created by the government is that there's a lot of historical accounts and it goes back a long way. And I have heard certain theories about the government capturing these things and upgrading them and splicing in different things, making them more intelligent. And this kind of goes back to the true blood theory with the historical accounts that maybe, I don't know, maybe type 1 Bigfoots have been here all along, or maybe type 2 Bigfoots are the original species. And then when you start getting into like the Wendigos and the Gugwees, the more purely carnivorous ones that seem to resemble even a little more baboon, that these have been engineered to be more of an engineered species, or maybe some of those were natural, but the modern day versions of them have been more enhanced. It's very fascinating to think about, although there are historical accounts about being the Wendigo species of Bigfoot, the carnivorous accounts, and also historical accounts of there being the Gugwees, the protruding snout type Bigfoots. But definitely, if you were going to genetically engineer a upright walking human being hominid Bigfoot species, it would probably look a lot like a Gugwee or a Wendigo. It would have ferocious appetite, intelligence, stealth, lots of claws, stuff that like nightmares are made out of. So to me, that is a pretty interesting theory, although there's a lot of plot holes in it, because historically, or maybe our government has made improvements and some of these creatures have been along and we've turned up their intelligence or turned down their aggression or vice versa. So that's very fascinating to me. A theory I heard the other day that I wanted to pass on to you, and I've heard this in the past, as the Atlantis theory, that Atlantis existed many eons ago and a great flood drowned their civilization, Atlantis being in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. And there's some theories that it was in the Bahamas or it was off of Spain. And there's all sorts of theories on Atlantis we're not going to get into here. But this theory was quite interesting to me, that the Bigfoots were developed to be laborers. And to be honest, if I wanted to move a bunch of stone blocks around and have general servants and laborers and, masonry type stuff, and, when stones were the thing in forges and being able to mine and work and do everything else, a Sasquatch would be really great for that. I mean, because they're basically super huge, superhuman strength. They have enough intelligence to problem solve. And if you could make them docile enough or control them somehow, then they would be very good servants. And this also gets to kind of a little more other out there theory that goes along with this. I heard that the dogman or werewolves or whatever you want to call them were designed to be more like guardians. If the Bigfoots were the laborers, a little more subdued, the dogmen were designed to be guardians, warriors. If you have a big city with high walls, you let these things roam around outside your walls and take out whoever's trying to trespass, like guard dogs. And this would kind of come back to where, the werewolf stories, if some ancient civilization could cross man and dog and get an upright walking dog. There's a lot of speculations on what technology Atlantis had. All very fascinating. There's a lot of other theories and hybrid type theories out there, but these are some of the more common ones. These are the ones I found really fascinating. If you feel I deserve it, please give this video a thumbs up and please hit subscribe. And if you haven't, ring the little bell next to it. Thank you very much and stay safe in the woods, folks.